Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And I'm Fran Garton. I'm a pain reduction coach, personal trainer, and fibromyalgia warrior. And I teach people all over the place how to live pain-free.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 We've got big news
Do we ever? We have a brand new website,
and so many amazing things to check out on it.
bonnpark.com.
What can we find there?
You can listen to our episodes right on the site.
You can check out the Bonn Park community blog.
You can find out how you can partner with us.
Oh, and the shopping. We have so much fun merchandise.
I'm going to buy myself the I'm the Marshall Ward tote.
Me too.
bonnpark.com. Check us out. Fran Garton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
We are very excited to talk to you. This is a new realm of work that we haven't discussed on our podcast at all.
I am a pain reduction coach. So basically, I started out as a personal trainer, and then I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And then I realized that all of the fitness that's out there and all the trainers, and I mean, I'm making a broad generalization by saying all, but for the most part, they don't take into account fibromyalgia. And when you have fibromyalgia, you live with chronic pain. And so what I ended up doing was trying to fit myself into the box of fitness. And then I would have a pain flare up, which would put me in bed for days. And then I'd be angry and frustrated and feel defeated. And then I just start the cycle again. And I just kept trying to do what other people were doing. And then finally I realized that this is not working. And so my journey took many, many years, and I did a lot of different things: mindset work, forgiveness work, nutrition, changing what I ate, changing how I viewed movement. And then I actually managed to get off all my medication, and I teach fitness classes, I coach clients, and my pain level, it's raining today, so my shoulder hurts. So I'm about a 2 today, but generally I live at 0.
I want to say a whole bunch of things here because you're the fact, I don't know if I'm going to leave this in, but the fact that you said 2, I'm looking in your eyes because I'm like, yeah, us women always say we're at 2, but it's probably like a 6, you know?
Yeah. And you know, Sarah, the funny thing is I'm simplifying my story. This whole journey of diagnosis to actually living pain-free where I am today was probably about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And before you get diagnosed, as you know, maybe some of your listeners have experienced this, it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 years before you actually get a diagnosis. And then when they give you the diagnosis of fibromyalgia, basically the advice is, well, you have pain, you'll have flare-ups, just deal with it, plan your life around it, and continue. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing else. So it's kind of frustrating. And I've summarized it very succinctly, but it really was a longer journey.
Probably because you're used to telling the story. Now if this is painful in a different way, you can stop me. But I have heard a generalization that, or I'm sure you've dealt with this, well, fibromyalgia doesn't exist. That's something that's all in people's head. It's part of depression or whatever that might be. And as somebody myself who experiences a lot of different body pain, I struggle with lower back pain. I have celiac, so I struggle with inflammatory issues. I have an adverse childhood experience score of 5. So, you know, there's a lot going on where my body is keeping that score and making quotation marks. So I think that there is a misconception out there that fibromyalgia isn't real.
So that's a really interesting.
I just threw a lot of stuff at you there.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I want to say it in a way that's helpful for people. It's not that fibromyalgia isn't real. It's that as you do more diving into the research about pain and how that affects the body and the brain and the connection between that, you start to realize that a lot of the pain that you have in your body that we experience is related to many factors. So you mentioned celiac. So I'm gluten-free and dairy-free. I have been for like 30 years. And the foods that you eat are inflammatory. So the gut can't process it, can't digest it. That shows up in the body, and then that causes, swelling in the joints and the muscles, and then you get pain. And so there's a lot of components to pain and to this whole idea of fibromyalgia not really being real. And there's a lot of research about pain and the brain connection and how we can change the way that we view pain by changing the way that we view pain. And so think about it in the sense of when you experience pain, so let's say I bang my hand, my brain doesn't know it's pain. My body doesn't know it's pain. The brain tells me that. So the nerves send the signals through the body, up the spinal cord to the brain.
Your hand hurts.
Yeah. And your brain, well, what happens even before that, Sarah, is that your brain says, hey, this is similar to, remember that time that we fell when we were a kid and we hurt ourselves? Remember that pain? Yeah, it's kind of like that. So let's make that happen. So it's kind of like a library of experiences. And so then the brain goes, okay, now we have pain. Then the nerve sends the signal back and then your hand hurts. So if we can adjust and switch the way that we have those experiences in our brain, then we can change the way that pain feels.
My doctor once told me after a car accident, she prescribed me some really strong pain meds and I didn't take them. And she was angry with me because, I don't know if I should cut this out because she's a wonderful woman and doctor, but she was upset that I wouldn't take them because she was talking about breaking pain cycle. Mm-hmm. But I have, with my ACE score, I'm such a good high ACE score, I have issues with taking prescription drugs. I won't do it. And I won't even take an Advil for a headache unless somebody reminds me that that's what we need to do. But would that make sense with breaking that pain cycle and relearning? Yeah,
that's part of it. So there's different, and I like what you're saying because everybody has their own opinion, their own scope, their own experience. So your doctor that prescribed those meds, that's their experience and their expertise. I don't do that. So my area of expertise is, dealing with mindset, dealing with movement and the muscles being tight or weak and how we can change that to change your pain. So everybody's perspective will be a little bit different. So even people that are listening are like, she's full of it. She has no idea what she's talking about. And that's their experience. But the thing is that there are so many aspects of pain. So like I mentioned, inflammatory food is one. Trauma that you suffered. Your body stores trauma. If you have emotional trauma, physical trauma, mental trauma, that is stored in your body. And it has to come out some way, and it comes out as pain. And pain is not bad in the sense that pain tells your body something is wrong. Something is going on here that we need to pay attention to. And for me, when I was at the height of my pain, my days were like 15 out of 10. Like that's how high my pain level was. And all I did was take Gravol, take Advil, go to bed, get up, repeat for years until I finally realized, okay, my food influences what I eat, what I feel in my body. And when you're in a pain cycle, so you're inflamed, let's say, that's your status. That's where you are, right? That's your benchmark of measurement. So if I'm at 15 out of 10 and then one day I'm at a 12, I'm like, that's fantastic, right?
It's already relief.
Right. Yeah. Whereas if now, so I always tell this story. My husband, he's an amazing person, great supporter. And I'll say, oh God, babe, today I have a lot of pain. Like I'm in a lot of pain. And he's very sympathetic. And he looks at me always and he goes, so what's the number? And I'm like, 4. He's like, 4? Psh, that's nothing. You were 15. Like, come on. And he's not being mean, but he's just kind of like put it in perspective. And I'm thinking, yeah, I know, but I live at 0 or 1. Mm-hmm. So 4 is high. For other people, there are people probably listening that are thinking 4 is fantastic. I'd love to be a 4.
Okay. I'm going to tell you a story here. With my first child, she was super overdue. We were induced. I was induced. It was a 21-hour labor. She was stuck. We got into lots of trouble, blah, blah, blah. But when I finally did get an epidural, hours and hours into this, my husband was joking, saying like, oh, like she's feeling okay. Eh? She's pretty high. And I was explaining, no, I'm not high. I am so relieved to not be in pain anymore that I'm elated. I'm giddy because my pain has gone from 25 or whatever we were at, down to something that was manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and think about that. That's a great example, Sarah. Like think about when you have a child, right? It's painful. Childbirth is painful. And you're just like, this is horrible. I can't believe I'm doing this. But emotion that's attached to actually having that child changes that. So think about that catalog that I was telling you of the memories. So when you have a pain that's even similar or in intensity, your body, your brain is going to say, well, what is this similar to? Oh, remember when we had the baby and we felt so euphoric and we were so happy? Let's make that happen again. So then the actual pain you're experiencing is very different. Or it's like getting a tattoo. I have tattoos and
They're gorgeous.
thank you. But, you know, people say, well, that must be really painful. Yeah. But it's a beautiful memorial piece or whatever it is. So the pain that's attached to it is very different. Is it more intense than a headache? Yep. Is it more intense than when I was at my height in fibro? Probably yes. But the feeling attached to it, the emotion is completely different.
What does forgiveness work look like?
Well, we're switching gears here.
We're
aren't we?
asking all the easy questions today. I love it. Forgiveness work. So I'll give it to you in a nutshell. So when I work with my clients, we work on a list of all the people that we need to ask for forgiveness from. And so you can do that face to face if it's safe, if you are comfortable doing that. You can write a letter to somebody. But the key to the forgiveness piece is there has to be no emotion attached to it once you release it. So for example, if I wanted to forgive you, Marshall, or I was asking for forgiveness from you, I would write you a letter apologizing, asking for forgiveness. Then I would reread the letter over and over and over until I have no emotion attached to it. And then I burn the letter. And so I always recommend people start with the easiest and asking for forgiveness from others. And then you work on the people you need to forgive. And again, make a list, pick the easiest one first, and you go through the process again. So forgiveness work is very challenging. It's very emotional. It can take a really long time. Does that answer your question? That's it in a nutshell. It's a little bit deeper than that. And it's a lot, the thing with forgiveness to remember, it's not about excusing anything that was done to you, but releasing that pain and emotion attached to it, because people do what they do based on what they have, what tools they have, how they were raised, what they were taught. Maybe they don't have the emotional capacity to give the emotion that you needed.
Yeah. So
Are you compiling a list in your mind
Yeah.
of people to forgive?
yeah, the letter goes up in flames.
Yes.
And you are left with new perspectives and feelings about the past.
Yeah.
Without ever having even possibly told anybody that you wrote this letter.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for you. So one of my coaches said to me once, holding anger and resentment and lack of forgiveness is like you drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Yeah, I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
Right?
And then you don't put yourself through the stress of wondering if the person got the letter and if they read it and if you're going to hear back from them. That's not a part of this.
That's not a part of it. It's not about, so for example, let's say I wronged you, Marshall, and I wanted to ask you for forgiveness. I ask you for forgiveness. You don't have to give it to me. You don't even have to talk to me. I could just write the letter. It's not about you doing that. It's about the process of me releasing it, and me admitting what I did that could have harmed you or hurt you or caused you some kind of sadness or whatever the emotion is, and allowing that to be released.
That's fascinating.
And apology and remorse, I'm not sure if I'm using the exact right terms, but those aren't always hand in hand, right? Like it's one thing to apologize, have remorse for something that you've done and offer that to another human, but forgiveness is for yourself.
Yes, 100%.
And it's a gift to a person if they are forgiven, but it's not about that. It's about yourself.
And that's why, and that's a good point, Sarah, that's why you ask for forgiveness first, so that you can feel what it feels like to receive, so then you can give it to someone else. It's a very difficult thing, and when I talk about it, there's always two camps. Well, three. One, they're like, psh, not doing that. Two, that's really hard. Three, let's do it. Like, that's kind of where people are. And it always depends on where you are. Some people never forgive, and that's their choice. That's their journey. But I would say, having done work myself, it makes a huge difference in your life because it changes how you view everything.
Yeah, I see. I have a sibling who says, we'll say a transport truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and killed our sister and brother-in-law, and our family forgives him. We never actually had any conversation with him, but collectively we really all do, and it feels really, really good to say that and to genuinely feel it. I think we all feel the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's a difficult thing. And when I work with my clients, so if you were to work with me, let's say, Marshall, I wouldn't say, okay, great, I'm so glad you're here, let's do forgiveness on day one. That's not usually what happens, to be perfectly honest. I work in 3-month cycles with people. So usually that first 3 months together is just figuring out what their journey is, where they need to be. So a lot of people, when it comes to pain management, we're dealing with food, we're dealing with movement patterns and changing those kinds of things, behaviors, mindset, limiting beliefs, things like that. And then often the second time through that they're with me for that next 3-month period, we start to dive into forgiveness. But again, it depends on the person. Some people come to me and they don't really know what it looks like. They just want to be without pain and have not done anything at all. They're just fed up and they don't know what to do. And then other people have done some work on their own and they're like, okay, now I need to take the next step. I need some guidance. And then they work with me. And then those people, we might start working on forgiveness. Just start, because it takes time.
Is there a difference between forgiving those living and those dead?
I think it's a hard question. For many people, the people that are dead, it might be a little bit easier.
I was going to say that. I think it'd be easier.
But there's a lot of resentment sometimes or anger towards those people. And you don't have the ability, even though you might not even have any contact with them anymore, you don't see that effect of it, even if you're not talking to them, even if you don't read the letter to them. So I think it depends on the person. It depends on the situation. For some people, it's much easier for people who are living. It just depends. It's a hard question. All the hard questions.
I know. For me, I find that we tend to martyrize the dead. So I really try and practice remembering some of the shitty stuff too. Like, oh, remember when they did this, or remember when they, like, just to kind of remember that this person that has passed doesn't get an automatic pass to being a good person just because it's over and you feel bad and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Because it is our nature to I don't know how else to say it other than martyrize the dead. You know, it's in our nature to let a lot go once they pass.
Well, I guess it's because some pain is relieved as well when somebody passes on who caused you great grief in the living years. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you are if you have pain, stress makes pain happen. Okay. So if you have high stress levels, you're going to be in pain. And for people that don't know my story, I'll give you the summary. I was working with the school board, you know, the curriculum and the government and funders, they tell you, you're going to do all these things. And as educators, you're like, I don't think that's going to happen because I don't have enough hours in the day and whatever. So your stress keeps building. Anyway, what happened was I spent about a year being nauseous and with a migraine. And I just kept taking Gravol and going to work and going to bed. And I just did this cycle over and over. And then one day I walked into my classroom one morning and I turned on the lights and I couldn't see anything. And so I lost vision in my eye and I had a migraine. And when I say this, for 4 months, I had a migraine, no word of a lie, 4 months. I walked myself, my husband carried me to St. Mary's Hospital. They knew me by name and they thought that I was a drug addict and that I was looking for free drugs because they would manually push Demerol into my vein to give me about half an hour of relief. And then I'd go home again. And I did that for a really long time. And then after I lost my vision, I ended up in bed for 4 months. So stress is really, really important. I'm very passionate about helping people reduce stress. And so coming back to your question, Sarah, sometimes something has happened and there's been a big event in someone's life and they're like, I need to really figure out what's going on. Other people have been living with stress for so long. And like we talked about earlier, their stress level is so high that they're just like, I don't know how to function. Like they're in burnout. They're crying in the middle of their kitchen floor. Like they don't know how to cope. And then other people realize that stress contributes to their pain. And then I've had people that have come to me and they're like, I think I feel a little bit stressed. And then when we actually dig into it, their stress is very high, but they're coping. They're trying to live through it and deal with it, but they're not doing the things that they need to do. And then there are other people who just come because they want some tools and need to, learn how to implement those in their lifestyle.
I mean, at a very stressful point in my life, right around the time when we started this project, I gave myself vertigo. Mm-hmm. Boom. Mm-hmm. I can't stand up straight. Yep. I can't sit in a chair without falling over. It was pretty crazy. It was pretty wild. Luckily, that's, gone and over with. Marshall, have you ever had to deal with anything like that?
No, I haven't.
Pretty chill, aren't you?
Yeah. No, I'm grateful for the fact that when I do feel stress, it does come and go. But I can't fathom the idea of having a migraine that lasts for months. I always think whenever I am feeling pain, I always think to myself, why doesn't the body at some point just kick in and say, okay, I know what this is. I've had enough of it, and kind of almost tire of sending those, whatever you call them, messages to the brain. I always wonder why the body at some point doesn't just stop doing that. I've said that to my wife, Sylvia, and she'll say, no, that's a good thing. You need to keep, there's something wrong if some body part goes numb. You know what I mean? You need to be sent that message over and over again. And I always think it's amazing that the body doesn't at some point just shut itself down and where it just becomes normal,
Well, it does to a certain extent, but I think, your wife is right. Don't you like hearing that? Your wife
He does
is right.
actually. Yeah.
No, she's right. Your body is sending the messages. It needs you to know that there's something going on. But the other thing to think about, your body adapts. Your body adapts very quickly to things. So think about your patterns of doing something, whether it's walking or sitting. So let's say you sit and you lean over to the left. Well, what happens is the body goes, oh, is that how we do this? Oh, okay, no problem. So then all the muscles on the left side start to pull you in that direction. And then all of a sudden you go and you see, your osteopath, and they're like, why are you leaning to the left? And you're like, I don't do that. Well, yes, you do. But your body has now adapted because you're telling it, let's lean to the left a little bit. And then the muscles just hold you there. So your body adapts to stress. Your body adapts to, these patterns that we have. And it does it for a variety of reasons. It could be protection, right? Could be just stupidity.
There comes a point where your body's had enough, and then that's like shock. Medically, that would be shock, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do get there, but it has to be pretty extreme.
But it depends on think about your life and think about how you were taught to cope with different things. So if you were raised and you were taught that if you had, sadness or anger, you were allowed to vocalize that, you're allowed to cry, you're allowed to talk about it, then that's what you do. So maybe as you get older and grow up, that's the pattern that you've learned. Other people might not have that. Mm-hmm. So then for you, maybe Marshall, that's maybe why you don't really have extreme bouts of stress or overwhelm, because you have better coping strategies because you were taught those, or maybe you learned them at some point in your life, whereas other people maybe did not.
We're going to take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsor.
Ever wondered what happens inside a black hole?
Or what quantum mechanics tells us about reality?
Curious about how the universe began or how it will end?
Feed your curiosity with Conversations at the Perimeter, a science podcast from Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics.
On each episode, we chat with a different scientist about the grandest questions in the universe, from the quantum to the cosmos.
Geek out to Conversations at the Perimeter, wherever you get your podcasts.
And now back to the show.
I've known people who have ME, which is also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and there's long periods in their life where they can't get out of bed. They're not able to go to work. They're not functioning well. They have good days, and then they have a long stretch of bad days. And family and friends will start to say things like, "Oh, they're not doing well now. Oh, they went out and did a bunch of stuff, and then they crashed and came back. Now they're back to that state," almost as though they're this dysfunctional human being that, well, they probably won't be at the next family event or whatever because of their, and people are sometimes not even respectful about how they speak about this, or almost like it's not really real or something, Anyways, I've seen this a few times now, and in your own journey and the long periods of time where you dealt with pain, did you have to experience and endure some of that, possibly like a stigma that comes with it, or feelings or things said around just people basically not understanding what you're going through?
So I have to say, during the height of my pain, I did take a lot of medication hoping to deal with it. So to be perfectly honest, especially at the height of it, I can't tell you what happened. I don't remember a lot of it, to be perfectly honest. But I hid it like a lot of people do. You just push through because you're like, oh, I don't want to cancel.
And it's coping, right?
Yeah, it's a way to cope. And you just don't want to cancel because you don't want to be that person that cancels in the last minute, because then people have that idea about you that, oh, well, we're going to invite Fran to come to something, but she's going to cancel. Did they say it? Probably. Did they say it to my face? No. So I was very fortunate, but I'm sure they said it behind my back. But to be perfectly honest, I don't really care. And neither should anybody else.
Stop caring about what people think of you.
Because they don't live your life. And so the thing, and this is people who have chronic pain, we call ourselves spoonies.
So this is Christine Miserandino?
Miserandino. And trying to explain energy. And for people that have chronic pain, we all have a certain amount of energy. But for people who do not have chronic pain, you can replenish that energy. You can go have a nap. You can just take a break. You can just take time out and you'll be fine. People that have chronic pain have a limited amount of energy for every day. And every task you do, and this is where the spoonie comes in, every task you do costs 1 unit of energy. So as I begin my day, I have 10 spoons. And so I get up in the morning and I have a shower. That costs me 1 spoon. Then I get myself dressed, make breakfast. That's another spoon. I go to work. I have to talk to people. That's another spoon. So it could be, I get my kids ready for school. There's another spoon. So I haven't even really started my day. I've used 4 of my 10 units of energy. So it is possible for people who are living with chronic pain that by the time they hit lunchtime, all their spoons are gone. Like their energy is gone, but they still have the rest of their day to get through. So they push through. So by the time they actually get home, or by the time, let's say Friday night arrives, like they're done. Like I remember Friday nights, I'd come home from teaching, 4:30, I'm done. My day is over. And if my husband saw me and we actually went outside for 5 minutes, like not an exaggeration, to just go on a motorcycle ride or walk around the block, that was huge. So people that lived in a part of my life experienced it, but I don't think people that don't have chronic pain can really, really understand what it truly means when someone says, I don't have energy for that. Because you could be thinking, well, just go have a nap, or like just go sit down and eat a meal and you'll feel better. No,
push through it.
Yeah, that eating the meal costs me a spoon. Right. So when it comes to your units of energy during the day, when you're dealing with chronic pain and the stress and all the other components of that and the emotions attached to it and the expectations that others might have for you to do what you need to do and to push through and all those thoughts, you're exhausted. Like you just want to cry. Like you can't function. And so if you don't understand that, just think about spoons and think about, set out 10 spoons in the beginning of your day, and every task you do costs you a spoon.
You said something there that me and Marshall both probably want to ask about, which is motorcycle rides. What are you talking about?
My husband we have a motorcycle. We have a Harley Davidson touring bike. And so we ride around. I'm a passenger. It's lovely.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. What's the world look like from the back?
Awesome.
Motorcycle.
It's awesome. And I fall asleep sometimes. I'm not going to lie.
Wait, that sounds scary. Are you hooked on somehow?
No, it's a touring bike. It's a big bike.
Okay.
So I have like nice leather armrests that wrap around me.
Okay.
And I have a nice back support. It's fine. We were up in Halliburton and we were visiting friends. And so we were driving through the town going to their cottage. And the little town, I don't know where exactly it was, but there was a stop sign. And my husband came to a stop and I had fallen asleep on the back of the motorcycle. So as he stopped, I went bang and my helmet crashed into the back of his helmet, and it kind of caused the motorcycle to jar around a little bit. Well, there was a police officer on the other side of the road at the stop sign. And we were kind of like, let's just take a minute here and just wait till the police officer drives by. And he just kind of gave us a little salute and keep on going. He's like, are you sleeping back there? I'm like, yeah, it's just what I do.
A previous guest, Lily DeRocha, did a beautiful job talking about being a motorcycle driver. And she talks about, the precision needed to be the driver and how your thoughts really aren't on much of anything. You're not flipping radio stations and singing the music or anything or thinking about anything but driving.
Which is mindfulness in its essence.
Yeah,
right?
but the passenger must have the freedom to have a very different experience. Sorry, the driver, I think there's a ton of freedom that comes with being a driver of a motorcycle, but the passenger must have a different kind of freedom. Do you and your husband talk about that?
I can just do what I want. Like I just get on the bike and you're right. I don't really have to worry about anything. And so for me, I'm always worried about him. So if it gets really windy or if it rains or we get stuck in a rainstorm or something, I'm always worried about safety and stuff like that. And he's like, I'm fine. It's fine. And if it's not safe, I'll stop. Like I'll pull over. But I can see the scenery. There are times when I'm on the motorcycle and I'm like, oh, is that a new building? Like we have a headset. Is that a new building? He's like, no. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, it's been there for 10 years. Are you sure? He goes, yeah, we've driven by it many, many times. Like, oh, I guess you're probably sleeping.
You can talk while you're on a motorcycle?
Yeah, we have a headset.
Oh, you have a headset. Okay.
Yeah, we have intercom.
And there's an anonymity that comes with riding a motorcycle, just by the nature of the helmets, like you're kind of...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an interesting... group of people. I find people that ride motorcycles, it's kind of like similar to people who have tattoos. You kind of show them and go, hey, nice tattoo. And they're like, yeah, where'd you get it? And you just start talking. Or like, oh, I like your motorcycle. And then you just start, like, people are super friendly. And we've found when we've traveled as well, even people who are not riders are very interested, and they're very social, and they want to find out about where you've come from and what you've seen. And so it's a really interesting culture as well.
Let's backtrack a little bit. This is something I ask for often. Let's backtrack a little bit and tell us about your journey from living a pain-filled life, trying to cope with working this full-time job, hitting some kind of breaking point and discovering this new life or creating this new life for yourself. What did that look like for you?
So when I was in the height of the pain and living through that cycle, it really was just a matter of existing, I would say. And I'm going to get really emotional. Feeling like I was letting everybody else around me down. And being in a profession where you're helping people as a teacher, and have to be there for people. When you get home, you don't want to be there for anybody. And that's hard. On your marriage, and it's hard on friendships. And so it really was a matter of just existing and trying to be who I thought I should be. I think that's probably the biggest thing of what was going on in the height of that, is trying to live up to all these expectations, which now when I think back to it, I know I'm going to flop back and forth here, but now when I think back to it, that's the biggest load of horse poo I've ever heard in my life. Like, you shouldn't live up to anybody else's expectations. You should be who you need to be. And if other people don't acknowledge that, then they don't need to be in your life. Like, that's sort of how it is. And so that's sort of changed things, I think, as far as friendships and who I'm friends with. Some people that I was close to before, I'm not necessarily close to anymore, because that's the old person, right? And then going through, teaching, and at the same time I became a personal trainer, and I started, going on that path, which was really never a plan. So this is interesting part of my story. I became a personal trainer because I was playing roller derby, and I was the lead trainer for my team. And I thought I should know some more stuff. Like, my dad was a competitive bodybuilder many, many years ago. And so I learned many things from him, but I thought I should really get some kind of certification. And so that's how I actually became a personal trainer, was for my teammates and to train them. And then I started getting clients coming to me, and then I was juggling. So then it became first existing, then I'm going to this juggling of teaching and training, and still dealing with the pain and all the things that are going on. When you're waiting for a diagnosis, when you're trying to figure out what's going on and trying to navigate all of that, it's extremely frustrating because no one can tell you anything. And so you're trying all these different things. So then there's this area of experimentation. Is this going to work? Is this not going to work? How will I recover? How will I feel? I was working with one of my great coaches, Kennedy Lodato, and I had called him, and I remember this day so vividly. And he had said to me, you need to figure out what is going on with your training business and coaching business and your teaching life. And he was talking about it from a very practical financial point of view. Because I was slowly pulling away. So I was full-time, then I went part-time. And then he said, you got to figure out what you really want to do. Kennedy said to me, you need to figure out how you're going to replace your teaching income with your coaching income. Now, I can't imagine doing anything else.
Fran, what was your roller derby name?
My roller derby name was Frozen Asset, and it was given to me by one of my teammates. And the reason that she gave it to me is because my ass is always cold. Always. Even in the height of summer, my butt cheeks are cold.
I'm trying to think if I know the temperature of my butt cheeks. Do you, Marshall? Not of mine, of your own.
No. They're warm when Sarah puts those car.
Oh yeah, when we're driving
seat
around
heaters
town.
on,
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm intrigued to hear about your book.
Well, I'm happy to tell you about it. It's called Body Bliss, The Journey to Body Acceptance. So I co-authored a chapter, and it's all about learning to accept our bodies and accept who we are, how we are. And it's a group of amazing women that wrote this awesome book. Every chapter is different. We all have our own stories and journeys about accepting who we are. And the thing I like the most about the book, I think, is that, when we talk about a journey, we have this idea that there's a final destination. And I don't think that there's a final destination. When you're dealing with yourself and your body and your confidence and your perception of yourself, it's an ever evolving thing. And so I like this book because when you read the chapters, you can see and you hear in the words of the authors themselves that it is a journey. And so when we use that word, I would like people to think about not thinking about a final destination, but it's just a journey. The whole entire life is a journey. There is no end to it. And the stories are just amazing and powerful. And everyone's journey is so different. And when I've read it twice. I'll read it again because the stories just touch you, and it deals with things like my fibromyalgia and my body image, and people who have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and people who had eating disorders and traumatic abusive relationships, and all different scope of journeys in how that relates to their perspective of their body.
Sarah introduced me to a social media influencer that goes by Sarah Nicole Landry, goes by the bird Papaya Igual. And the most of all the things I've read from her, all the poignant messages she sends across, the best one was, for me, was I don't have to love my body, but I can learn how not to hate it. And that for me is like, that's kind of above every other message, eh?
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me of one of the authors in this book. Actually, she said, your body is the least interesting thing about you. And I think she says it 3 times. Your body is the least interesting thing about you. And if you remember that, and I think about it ever since I read it, I think about it, I'm like, yeah, like, okay, my body's great. It's covered with tattoos. I'm healthy. I'm strong. But yeah, it's the least interesting thing about me, because really, what can I say about my body? I mean, I'm curvy. Okay. Yeah, I have tattoos. There's nothing really else that I can say about it. But my life is friggin' amazing. It's so interesting. I've met interesting people. I've done some amazing things. I've traveled. So my journey is very interesting, things I've done. But my body, I mean, it's fine. And it's very important because it keeps me doing all the things I love doing. But yeah, your body is the least interesting thing about you.
Yeah, people, when it comes to this podcast we just recorded, we'll be talking about the conversation and not our bodies.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's right.
I remember it took a long time in my own life to realize, not everybody likes me. And some people actually want to see me fail. You know what I mean? It's a hard thing to kind of accept. But once you do.
Once they do.
Who cares? Who cares what other people think? Fuck them.
Bonn Park is made possible with the support of the Kitchener Public Library and the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation.
Our show is produced by Sarah Geidlinger,
And Marshall Ward.
with audio engineering by Sarah Geidlinger.
Bonn Park's original music is by Alan Lung. Harry, you still with us? We want to tell you about a fun project that we have. Are you ready?
Yeah.
We have another podcast called An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. Here's Colin Hunter of Kayfabe News to tell you all about it.
Welcome to An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. I'm Colin Hunter from Kayfabe News. Marshall is utterly obsessed with professional wrestling. Sarah is utterly perplexed by professional wrestling. On each episode of An Unscripted Spectacle, Marshall and Sarah talk with a different guest from the world of wrestling. Promoters, referees, journalists, and current and past stars of the Squared Circle to talk deeply about the strange magic of professional wrestling that has enchanted Marshall his whole life. Can they turn Sarah into a fellow connoisseur of professional wrestling? She'll need some convincing.
I find out who Jimmy Corderas is.
Who the heck are you?
Oh, well, that's a good question. For those who don't know, I spent the better part of over 2 decades working in WWF/WWE, mostly as a referee inside the ring.
I have the honor of meeting the magnificent Lufisto.
I heard that you were described as the first lady of hardcore. I've just recently found out what hardcore is.
Yeah, thanks to Madman Pondo.
When I've learned that I was going to be inducted, it was like, it is now my time to tell the story of women's wrestling. Because so many times I've heard, oh, this is the first time this happens in women's wrestling history. And I'm like, no.
I learned all about the storytelling and writing process from Tom Casiello.
Yeah, I was in soap operas for 14 years. I was at Young and the Restless last. That was from 2009 to 2011. And so I thought, I'll go in for the interview. I'll be honest with them. If I blow it, I blow it. Not the end of the world. And I was there for 6 years. And I rose up the ranks to managing lead writer. And it was the most insane time period of my entire life.
I got a new skincare regime from RJ City.
Checking out your hair, and I wish that mine looked like yours. You have beautiful locks.
Thank you. The secret, this isn't a plug, it feels like an endorsement, is aloe vera. I have it here. I put it on my skin. I put it in my hair. I use the gel. I put a couple drops of peppermint in.
I have a plant right there on my
Good.
fridge.
Cut it open, squeeze it out, and put it, honestly, wherever you want. It's good for you.
I find out that Colt Cabana is just famous enough that he can still buy groceries. And Tyson Kidd tells me all about the people's elbow. Who knew?
Basically comes to a complete stop, then brings his leg over the guy like he's going to do a leg drop. But the leg keeps circling past the guy, and then he drops an elbow on the guy.
Oh, and the elbow represents all the people of the fans? He's been voted, he's going to drop this elbow?
Well, he started calling himself the People's Champion, and then that move just became the People's Elbow.
And then there's also, as you know, there's the People's Strudel.
Yeah. I mean, there's the People's Eyebrow. There's a lot of the people. Got a lot of people.
So check out An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. Available anywhere you get your podcasts.